As somebody who has written biographies of Dietrich Bonhoeffer and William Wilberforce, I have an interesting view on this idea of being quote-unquote political. I think that we have seen in recent years good examples of how not to be political. We've seen examples of stridence. We've seen examples of people, in a way, making an idol of politics. When you make an idol of politics, God immediately says to you, stop that, don't do that, don't make any kind of an idol. It's not about winning, it's about obeying me, it's about loving your enemies, political and otherwise, and fighting in a way that is gracious and civil, even though it's passionate. Wilberforce and Bonhoeffer both give us examples of people who understood that you cannot shrink from politics. So there's a wrong way to do it. We've seen that. We don't want to do that. But to then say that I'm going to avoid politics and just quote-unquote proclaim the gospel, it's a fundamental misunderstanding of politics and the gospel, and it's a fundamental misunderstanding of God's calling to Christians to be political. We're called to be political God's way. William Wilberforce was a politician. He wasn't just political, he was a politician, but he was God's politician. In fact, there's a book about him called God's Politician. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was incredibly political, but in a godly way. So God calls us to fight. I mean, if there are people being threatened who cannot speak for themselves, if they're Jews being threatened, I as a Christian have no choice but to get political and defend them. I got to do it God's way. If there are Africans being enslaved, William Wilberforce said, I have no choice as a Christian, I must get political. Now, I'm going to have to be political the way God calls me to be political, but there is no chance that I can avoid politics. For Christians today to think that somehow they can avoid politics, it's an absurdity. The question is, can you avoid fighting the wrong way? And the answer to that is, of course you can. And then the question is, can you avoid not fighting at all? I would say no. You've got to fight, but you've got to fight God's way. This is a fundamental and absolutely vitally important issue for us today to understand that we've got to be involved. The question is, can we be involved the right way, the way God calls us to be involved, and not the way some people in previous decades have been involved, which we now know is the wrong way.